Their response to a perceived insult to their self-esteem is to react without preparing or thinking of the consequences. People can easily goad them into taking chances they wouldn't normally take. Again, we have a brave front masking feelings of fear or inadequacy. Your self-esteem is so delicate that you feel you have to continually prove yourself. The question is, have you objectively evaluated the risks, and have you done everything you can to prepare? The safest course is never to take on any risk when angry, defensive, or drunk. Other people just have a hard time getting along with petty authority, but can adapt when they're not being picked on. I once knew a high school student who was always in trouble. One issue was that he insisted on wearing his baseball cap all the time, which was against the school's dress code. After a year of in-school suspensions, he finally dropped out. But next fall he started night school, where he did very well, and no one cared if he wore his cap. To him, the high school's dress code was Mickey Mouse, slang for petty and arbitrary authority. He had the good sense to respect earned authority. But the dress code felt to him too much like the rules of his stepfather, who bullied him all the time just to show who was in charge. Passive-aggressive behavior. This is a frequent tactic that the automatic self uses to express rebellion deceptively and unconsciously. It allows us to express our anger without feeling it. Passive aggression is a strategy that's often used when there's a power imbalance. It's when you make someone else feel the anger that you feel. Those with little authority often do it by dawdling, breaking things, or insisting on dotting every I and crossing every T while the boss sits and fumes over the deadline that's being missed. You run into it in many bureaucracies. The Department of Motor Vehicles in almost every state is thought of this way, perhaps unfairly, where the employee feels a grievance and takes it out on the customer. We can do this deliberately or unconsciously. By definition, when we do this, we use our defenses to blind ourselves to any angry feelings. Consider this example. I'm so sorry I lost the keys. I know you're really angry at me. It's all right now. We replaced the keys. I'm not angry. No, I know you. This is the kind of thing that really upsets you. No, I'm really not angry. You must be. No, I'm not. You're just saying that. No, I'm not. I can tell you're angry. All right, I'm angry. Are you happy now? I knew it. You can't hide anything from me. Guilt-inducing behavior. Giving someone the last piece of pie in such a way that the recipient feels guilty about taking it is passive-aggressive. Some of the most dramatic self-destructive behavior can also carry a passive-aggressive message. Suicide attempts, cutting, anorexia. Again, people who do these things may not be aware of any desire to hurt others, but they put their loved ones in an impossible situation by making them feel guilty and enraged. Passive aggression can be a good strategy if your goal is to drive your partner or boss crazy. But if that's not your goal, it's inherently self-destructive. If something is making you angry, figure out what it is and do something about it. If you get in trouble for passive-aggressive behavior and you're not aware of feeling oppressed or angry, maybe you should take a hard look at your feelings. Being passive-aggressive makes people stay away from you. And it doesn't help career advancement either. There is a kind of passive aggression we commit against ourselves that is insidiously self-destructive. When I leave dirty dishes in the sink to clean up tomorrow, I know that tomorrow the future me will be angry at the present me. Same thing if I waste hours playing word games on the computer and don't really leave enough time for my work. I will feel guilty and lose respect for myself. And this gets into the vicious circle of guilt. Feeling guilty and oppressed, I lose motivation to do what I need to do, so I neglect my chores even more. and then I feel even guiltier. The result can be depression, the general brownout of all feelings, ambition, and drive. The help-rejecting complainer. This may be a term of art in psychotherapy circles, because we see a great many people like this. But chances are good that you've seen this pattern in your family or friends. It refers to people who have many maladies and derive an odd kind of pleasure from baffling all helpers. At first they get your sympathy because they are in real distress, and so many people, methods, and medications have let them down. You may play right into this, seeing yourself as the hero who finally solves the mystery. But you'll find out that what you have to offer is no good either. You begin to feel inadequate and unworthy as the complaints escalate and become more personal. This is another form of passive-aggressive behavior. The help-rejecting complainer feels like a battered victim of life and is angry about it, but never feels angry. If you dig deeper, you often find that she's never really followed through on any course of treatment. Instead, you become the target for all her anger, making you feel inadequate and unworthy is the point. It's a defense called projective identification, in which the passive-aggressive takes her own feelings and makes someone else feel them. The trouble with nice guys. Sometimes there's a lot of anger hiding behind a nice guy. Of course, there are genuinely nice guys, both male and female, who are simply thoughtful, considerate, and generous without any hidden agenda. But there are too many people who appear nice simply because they can't use their own anger appropriately, and it comes sneaking out in some disguised form. These are people whose anger and aggression is so deeply buried it never comes into consciousness. Instead, you have the defense of reaction formation, doing precisely the opposite of the unconscious desire. But sometimes that desire leaks out in a very unpleasant surprise. How many school boards have had money embezzled by the meek bookkeeper everyone loves? How many respected pastors have run away with the choir director? Nice guys are often people who consciously try to be kind and considerate and to play fair, but their automatic self can be swirling with rage. Robert Glover, no more Mr. Nice Guy, points out that there's usually a big mess underneath this mild facade because nice guys are dishonest. They say what they think you want to hear. They cover up their mistakes. You can't really trust them. Nice guys are passive-aggressive. They tend to express their anger in indirect ways, like forgetting commitments, not following through, or screwing things up. The other person ends up angry, but guilty and confused because it seems like the nice guy is really sorry. Nice guys are full of rage. Though many of these people never seem to get angry, sometimes the rage explodes in vastly inappropriate ways. Nice women will give and give till it hurts, then dissolve into rage or despair. Nice men, if they don't explode periodically, often have a secret life, gambling or a pornography addiction, for instance. Nice guys can't communicate. They don't listen because they're so preoccupied with trying to read your mind to appease you and avoid conflict. They don't respond honestly and directly. They don't initiate real intimacy. Nice guys are horrified when they hear this because they believe their motives are pure. They just want to get along. They want to be liked. And they don't see anything wrong with that. They don't think through the real implications of the stance they take in life. But the fundamental dishonesty of their position means that nice guys aren't trustworthy. They can't form real intimacy, though that seems to be what they want most. They are seen as unreliable, so they don't really get ahead. It's a very self-destructive strategy for getting through life. It creates a tremendous amount of anxiety because these people are always trying to figure out what others want instead of just speaking their minds. It makes life very complicated, trying to remember what lies you've told to whom and trying to squirm out of situations when you're close to getting caught. Nice guys really need to practice honesty lessons, described earlier. When they do, they'll find that life is much simpler and that their anxiety level has been reduced greatly. Rebelling against yourself. A great deal of self-destructive behavior is the result of having your own standards set to impossibly high levels. People are always evaluating themselves, and they get angry or disappointed, feelings that may be suppressed into the unconscious, when they feel they've let themselves down. Most binge eaters, for instance, are dieters who count every calorie. Going on a binge represents a break from the misery of this constant self-scrutiny. The process of eating is immediately soothing, and the binger forgets herself as she prepares food and eats it. She can also lose sight of how much she has eaten, temporarily. High standards are often accompanied by a punitive superego, the inner critic, the voice in our heads that is always sharply critical of our efforts and never lets us be satisfied. This is often the voice of parents who raised us with harsh or arbitrary discipline and never praised us for doing something well. Ideally, doing the right thing should be its own reward. We should be pleased with ourselves, get a boost in self-esteem when we've done well. But if we have a punitive superego, we're bullied or coerced into doing the right thing. We don't do it because it makes us happy. We do it to escape punishment. It's an empty success, and we resent it. As much as possible, I'm trying to stay away from psychological jargon. But sometimes jargon contains the perfect term. The superego is part of Freud's model of the mind, and it was thought to contain two components. One was the conscience, which spoke to you or punished you with guilt, negative thoughts, or lowered self-esteem when you did something below your standards. The other was the ego ideal, which contained those standards, what you thought was right, whom you admired, what you aspired to. No one believes anymore that these things have a physical existence in the brain, but they make a powerful metaphor. A punitive superego just keeps wailing away at you all the time because you can't meet your own standards. It usually comes from a parent, often the parent of the same sex, who never seemed to be satisfied with your performance, from harshly critical to consistently just a little disappointed. It may come from religious guilt. It may come from your own competitive wish to be the best, and an unforgiving attitude toward yourself when you fall short. It may be that your standards are impossibly high. Since our own minds never give us any recognition for good behavior, we look outside our minds for rewards, or we punish them with dangerous chemicals. Sometimes we avoid exposing ourselves to criticism from ourselves or others. When I was in 7th grade, my school had a spelling bee. To my surprise, I won. Then I placed second in the regional bee, earning me a spot in the Metro Chicago Spelldown. The winner in Chicago would go on to the national bee in Washington. If you've never been in a spelling bee, you have no reason to know this. But people have assembled long lists of words for kids to memorize, with pronunciations and short definitions. After I won my school competition, my father got some of these lists and started coaching me. After I placed in the regional, the drilling at home got really intense. I kind of liked it because it was something I could do easily. Spelling is a trick of the mind, a kind of photographic memory for words plus the ability to guess when you figure out roots and derivations. But even though I kind of liked it, it was a little too much attention, and my father would get really upset because there were certain words I just seemed to have a mental block on. That mental block was probably the start of my rebellion. I resented my father's anger and was afraid to disappoint him. At the Chicago Spelldown, I did very well, making it to 6th place. My consolation prize was a new Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. My father wrote in it, "On to Washington," referring to the national championship the next year. After a few weeks, I took Scotch tape and pressed it hard on those words, then pulled it off, effectively erasing them. It was a classic acting out. I remember feeling nothing in particular at the time. Next year, in 8th grade, I didn't make it out of my school competition. I can't say I lost on purpose. There was a big part of me that wanted to do well again. Nevertheless, I went out on a word I think I knew. I'm still not certain that I blew it because I wanted to, or if I just had a momentary lapse, or what. That's the way it is with the unconscious. Sometimes a thing means two things or more at the same time. A frequent side effect of rebelling against yourself is the feeling that you are entitled to a consolation prize. I worked very hard at achieving my goal, but just fell short through no fault of my own. I deserve to do something nice for myself. But the nice thing you do for yourself turns out to be self-destructive, because deep inside you know you weren't doing your best. Here are some common consolation prizes: overeating, pornography, gambling, drugs and alcohol, overspending, depressed shopping, internet addiction, impulsive or destructive sex. The inner Mo. Try making a list of everything that's wrong with you, everything that makes you cringe: ineptitudes, pomposity, insensitivity, can't catch a fly ball or bake a pie. All your bad habits, from picking your nose to yelling at the dog to actually hurting others. Get in touch with the voice in your head that criticizes you whenever something goes wrong. You'll never learn, never get ahead. You're a coward. There's nothing to be afraid of. You're a moron. You should have known better. Why haven't you lost weight, started to exercise, finished painting the house? Give this a good 10 minutes. Even though it's uncomfortable, you want to get everything out there. When you're done, destroy your list. You're not nearly that bad. That voice in your head is your inner critic. Most of us hear it regularly. But it gets much louder under stress. It's the voice that constantly judges you and finds you wanting. It blames you and assumes that any attempt to mitigate your responsibility is just an excuse. It makes mountains out of molehills. If it's been judging you harshly since childhood, you know it comes from your parents or caregivers. Look closely at how they treated you. Is that how you would want to treat your child? If not, what do you take from this lesson? Hopefully, it's a bit more compassion for yourself, a bit more distance from the critical voice. There's another voice in our heads, which I call the timid defender. It tries to answer the critic, but it always gets drowned out because it can only use the normal habits of the mind: rational thought, defenses like denial and rationalization, turning to alcohol or medication. Look, it says, don't beat yourself up over this. You did a pretty good job. Don't sweat the small stuff. It probably doesn't matter to anyone else. But these comforting thoughts never get through. We try to escape or forget about the critic, but every time we do, we give it more ammunition to use against us. You idiot, pretending you don't care, running from your responsibilities. You can't get rid of me that easily. This is what happens when our standards are too high and we can't accept ourselves as we are. We blame ourselves far too much and make ourselves more miserable. Then we defend ourselves ineffectively, perpetuating a vicious circle. It's much the same way that inconsistent or inattentive parents treat their children. When the defender is in control, our defenses are up and working, so we can delude ourselves, spoil ourselves, let ourselves off the moral hook. We'll promise to reform tomorrow, and that will let us feel better for the moment. But the inner critic is always there, waiting for our defenses to fall, ready to go back to beating us up, telling us we're hopeless failures. We vacillate between spoiling ourselves and punishing ourselves. It helps to identify the inner critic as an outside voice with impossible standards, to realize it's not the voice of God, and to learn gradually to ignore it.